And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Shaping Success with me, myself, and Robert Watson. We're going through Ars Victorious again. It is the Wednesday edition. We're going to start something a little bit different next week, so that'll be fun and interesting. We also got a sponsor, so that's going to be fun to start talking about a little bit too. They actually sent me some stuff to, take some shots of.
Uh-oh.
And it's not alcohol.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's sad. Right.
Yep. So we got Cece and Nikki in the chat room on YouTube. It's great to see you guys. Cece, good to see you again. We're in number 20, chapter 20, and it's called The Cost of Lies. And it was funny because I had flashbacks when I was reading through it about changing tires, because that's what I did for 11 years. And you're on the side of the road changing a tire, you're actually going to be late to where you're supposed to be. So let's fire this one up, Robert.
Absolutely. Good morning. So this is the middle 80s in Italy, and I am posted to what's called CTAF, which is Southern Command, in some nondescript role. And so I'm driving my Mercedes 190, and all of a sudden I'm doing about 90 on one of their wonderful roads. And all of a sudden I have a blowout, and my car starts to spin, in the direction of the blowout, right? And I correct properly, because I had taken the special driving course so that you can deal with spins. Yeah, kind of like that. And so really, really cool. But no, I spun around and turned in properly. And I think I spun at least twice before I got the car kind of comfortably to the side of the road. And I had this PTSD for probably about a month or two after that, right? Anytime my speed got up above 70 or 80 miles an hour, that I was going to have a blowout and I was going to go spinning in circles. But when I looked at the tire was shredded. And I was like, huh? Right? I mean, it made no sense. And so I looked down at the tire and I could see the marks where the tire had literally been cut.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So we had a lot of activity back in those days, an organization called Red Brigade. A lot of times you knew of it in that time period of Red Army faction, Baader-Meinhof, all that kind of stuff. This was the terrorist or militant groups inside of what we would consider Western occupied territory during the Cold War. And so it was pretty clear. They had taken a couple attempts at us for other ways, but this is pretty clear that that's what they did, right? Yeah. But as I spun around in circles, I got out and I popped open my trunk and I looked down, and I didn't have a tire tool. I had a tire, but no tire tool. And just as I'm starting to lament my situation, right, kind of get my bearings and stuff, an Italian farmer pulls up on his tractor, right? Awesome. I don't speak a lick of Italian, right?
Yeah.
I speak Spanish, so I could kind of muddle through it. But I mean, he knew what my problem was. I mean, this wasn't, shocker, right? I believe I was in uniform at the time, so it made it easier for him. But, we kind of communicated by sign language. He took off for a minute, came back with a tire tool. We managed to get it jacked up, tire replaced, but I ended up being like an hour and 15 minutes late back to my command. So I drive in and the colonel is livid, right? He's like, what happened? You went over to the facility, and I said, I popped open, I didn't say a word, I just popped open the trunk, and he looks at it and he goes, okay. And he said, this never happened. And I was like, okay. He said, we don't need this. And I said, fair enough. And so that was it. End of the conversation. That the event never took place. It never happened. But it was one of the things that you start to realize over time is, people tend to look at truth as everything that's disseminated, right? And I knew from my position in the intelligence community, there was quite a bit that was never disseminated. So the idea of what truth was exactly what you were told, what was was given out to the public or whatever. The rest of it was, I don't know, covered up fiction, whatever.
Right.
I call it the cost of lies because you really never have a handle on truth. You think you have truth, but the reality is you only have truth that is let out one way or the other. And it's really difficult in your mindset, especially in times like this when we're staring at social media, other platforms, and trying to figure out what truth is, right? You look at the politics and stuff, and it's like, and so I've always taken the attitude, and we did from the intelligence side, was we always operated with a boots on the ground mentality. Was this, you might tell me something's going on in the country and you might give me some suggestions or whatever, but my attitude was always, I'm going to go in country, find out for myself, put eyes on the target,
Right.
so that I know exactly what's going on. Because anytime I'm depending on anybody else, unless I really, really know them, I'm seeing their perspective.
So you're telling me that we cannot believe everything that someone tells us. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, even in the best intentioned people, right?
Yep.
Do not see it the way it really is. They see what they see from their vantage point. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's kind of the thing that it always is, right? It's like these things from the outside view of what we see becomes our truth. Like we start to create that in our mind, what is really true, instead of actually knowing the truth, because we're like, well, this is what I saw and this is what I saw. And like, if they say it enough, and that's kind of like the way the media is right now, is like, if they say it enough and people listen enough, it becomes true, whether it's true or not. It just depends on how many times you hear it and who shows it to you or throws it at you with that context that they're trying, their narrative, right?
Right. Well, it's like there are many times, many situations where I'll hear something on the media and I know it's an abject lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just, I just kind of shrug and go, okay, whatever.
Right.
And so the problem with most of us is we don't have enough information to even begin to vector truth. And so you just accept it for what it is. And I think I made one analogy in the book, and really early on, I think it was first chapter, where I said, they had this really great concept attributable to Aristotle. And it just wasn't. I mean, it sounds nice, but he didn't actually say it.
Right.
And that's back to the old thing of if I can't identify it anywhere, then it's not real.
Right.
And so that the problem we always struggle with, especially in my old world in the intelligence community, is there are so many intentional misinformations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Intentional, right? Deliberate coding of things for various reasons. A lot of them really, really solid reasons, but they are what they are. And so you end up with everything tends to be a narrative, not a truth.
Right.
And that's really difficult. And for example, like products, right? Like health products. They may or may not have the effects they do, but here's the thing. I got to test them on my body.
Yeah.
Because everybody's different.
Yep.
I might be that 2% that breaks out in hives by using it. So it is really, truth becomes something that you can experience. I remember the conversation that Buddha had, and it went like this: if you go along the street and you find the Buddha, kill him. Okay. And his whole point to that was, you're not supposed to believe anything that you can't objectively prove for yourself. In other words, we're not going to ask you to take anything that you cannot validate in your existence. For example, I always used to tell people, do you want to see gravity? And I take a pen and I drop it. I said, there's proof of gravity.
Right.
Right. I can fly as a pilot because gravity works and aerodynamics works and the physical science work. Right. I can tell you the times they don't work too, but the point is they're understandable. But in the human community, right, things get a lot fuzzier, right? How we respond to things, what things are. Physical properties are pretty simple, right? Things like gravity, very, very simple. Aerodynamics, thermodynamics, they're all really, really simple, right?
Right.
You do measurements for blinds, right?
Yep.
Other than the house shifting, right? Which houses do shift.
Right.
Measurements don't change.
Yeah, they're pretty
This isn't
absolute.
the Twilight Zone. Right, exactly. But most of what happens in our world is not. Okay, so we end up getting the question of, and this whole cost of lies thing was actually spun off of Chernobyl,
Mhm.
right? This entire phrase. And so I was in Italy. Funny, we talk about Italy. I was in Italy when Chernobyl went off, right? And so their idea to us about Chernobyl was, first off, we didn't know what it was. It took us about 12 hours to figure out what it was, because obviously we took ourselves up to a different defense condition, what you call DEFCON, because we didn't know what was happening. And so once we find out, their idea of taking precautions was we weren't supposed to eat any vegetables.
Uh-huh.
Vegetables. And I was thinking to myself, what in the hell good is that? So what you're telling me is the cloud of radioactive dust that's going overhead, my only downside is it goes and hits the vegetables.
Yeah, that's it. That's all. Don't eat vegetables because that's the only thing that you got.
And so I'm like, okay, no salads for a month.
Until the new ones come out of the ground that's already radioactive.
Right, that's already radioactive. And I'm like, okay. So, and I don't mean to push anybody's buttons, but it's a little bit like COVID, right? When COVID came out, I just said to somebody, I said, you know what COVID is? And they went, no. I said, it's a bad cold.
Right.
And they said, what do you mean it's a bad cold? I said, it's a COVID virus. The cold is a COVID virus. And they said, well, what do you think the real problem is? I said, I know what the real problem is. They built our cities, overpopulated them, and didn't put enough hospitals in. They were told, matter of fact, you go back and look at research in 1950, and it basically says that you were supposed to have so many hospital beds per people, right? And we are woefully, I mean, we're like 900,000 beds short of where we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's only going to get worse, right?
Right. It doesn't get better.
Yep.
And remember, over that past 70-year period from 1950, did our cities get smaller or larger?
Yeah. And the funny thing about that whole deal is that even so with that, like we're coming into the largest population in our largest generational population in our country is coming up, and we're not going to have enough room, and we don't have enough doctors, and we don't have, it's insane.
But they get obsessed about, well, what your problem is that you're spreading it. I'm like, yeah, colds do spread.
Right.
But what they don't want to take responsibility is for poor urban planning.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they don't want to take responsibility for. They want to take responsibility for selling the land that should have had hospitals on it to developers.
Yep.
That's what they don't want to take responsibility for. I was like, oh, okay, now we're clear.
It's all a misdirection is all it is. It's shift your mindset, your eyesight to something different so that we don't get the source of the real problem.
Well, they were like trying to explain COVID like they were explaining the Black Plague, right? And I'm like, I mean, that doesn't even make sense. But you see, that's back to the concept of the cost of lies. What were the cost of lies? Here's the point. If a real problem came in America, a real health problem, how would the population respond after you just cried wolf?
Right. Oh, that's going to be the biggest problem anyway, because especially now that everything is coming to light, like there's nothing. Jay and I were talking about this the other day where he was talking about masks, like, and how and there's a lot of stuff coming out now, right? Like Fauci's on trial and talking about, well, we didn't know if that'd work, and we didn't know this, and we didn't know that, and blah, blah, blah. It's like bullshit. You knew. You're a doctor. Pay attention to the science. You know exactly what's going on. Like, these things are all things that you knew, but you just lied to everyone to make them think that it was, got the control. And now if this happens again, and if it's an actual real thing, everyone's going to tell him to kiss off. They're not going to do what he says. It's going to be
it'd be a bloodbath.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's again, that's part of the cost of lies.
Yep.
Right. That all falls into the same category. And it's like, and I mean, not to get into negatives in relationships, but so they're going along in a relationship and he cheats on her or she cheats on him and lies, right?
Right.
What's the cost in the relationship? Well, the cost is trust.
Yep.
Because here's the thing. You can do all the apologizing in the world. But what happens when you can't get a hold of them 3 years later in an afternoon?
The seed is
Where did it,
planted.
right. Where's your head go?
Yep.
Right. Why? Because what was the cost of lies? And that's the same thing what did she say?
She says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
And I'm here to help.
Yeah, it's like, uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, again, here's the weird part is, I work for the government. We've served in the military since, the Revolutionary War.
Right.
It's not like we're not part of the government. It's just that some of what Washington attempts to do is bizarre.
Yeah.
It's not what the mass majority of people are doing. And the mass majority of people are looking at you like, are you guys nuts? Do you really believe your own,
No,
yeah,
but we have to pretend really hard that we do believe it, because if we do, then they'll believe it.
Well, one of the legitimacy problems, I don't know, again, you're a little young for this reference, but you do know what Watergate was, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, the Watergate scandal. Well, so when Watergate goes on, the scandal breaks, and that was the high in public trust in American institutions and government was in the 60s, actually probably the low 70s. It hovers on average right now at about 15 to 17% trust. So you have to wonder how a government actually stands.
That's true.
When it's right.
That's kind of mind blowing. That's nothing.
Right. It's basically no one believes you, and everybody's kind of like, yeah, but we don't really want to do anything about it. Let's just let them. Yeah.
They're getting designated for assignment.
Yeah.
That's a terrible batting average.
Oh no. They're in any kind of sports analogy,
Yep.
they've been long since fired.
Yep.
But there does come a point in time where you wonder how you do that on top of a COVID, on top of an inflation, right? Got to remember, this is, again, whether you like Trump or Biden, doesn't really matter. You went from COVID to double-digit inflation almost.
Mm-hmm.
I said, how happy are the people? Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I talked to, I'm on a daily basis, I'm talking to people about this inflation thing, and like Idaho is something that with the housing market, like it's become such a nightmare anyway, because so many people are moving here to escape places, like they're coming here because they want to get out of the place where they're at. And it's driven the price of the house up. I was having a couple exterior shades, installed on my house yesterday, and I had a guy over here who was like looking at my house going, man, wish I and he's like my installer or whatever, but he's talking to me about how, well, not everyone can live in like, and it's not a mansion by any means, but it costs a lot of money. Like that's the way it is. And I was like, dude, you have to understand, 10 years ago, I bought a house for $117,000. It was a 1,500 square foot house. I sold it for $200,000. I bought a house for $324,000. I sold it for $600,000. All in like a 5-6 year span. And this is insane. This is what's happening. And now I live here because the cost has kept going up. My income I guess my income's gone up because I went from a teacher to a salesperson. But other than that, nothing has really changed. Like they haven't changed wages in Idaho. There's people who, I was so proud. I got a phone call from one of my students the other day who said, hey, can you come give me a quote on blinds? We walk into the house and it's an 800 square foot house, and she paid more for that 800 square foot house than I paid for my 1,500 square foot house, like 3 times as much now. And it's insane. No one who grew up here and works on the wages that Idaho has to offer can afford a home.
Yeah. So my mom and dad bought their first house that we lived in 1973 for $23,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So put this in context. Okay. It was a 1,500 square foot
interest.
home. Well, he got, fortunately he was a veteran. So he got 6%. Okay. Which was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because mortgage rates were high. So he gets that and he's thinking to himself, this is great. Now I want you to put it in perspective. Paid 24, 23 for the house. He made $18,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay. It was not uncommon to be buying a house at 1 times your income.
Mm-hmm.
1 times.
Yep.
No 3.5 multiples, 4 multiples, stuff like that. No. 1 time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think his payment was, his mortgage payment was like $125.
Yeah. Those days are gone.
Right. But again, remember what that was. 1973 was before the great inflation that came after that, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing we saw was you could actually take a minimum wage job and live on it in the 70s, right? That's not even
that's
close
impossible
to
now. And like you think about that, even like minimum wage, and that's part of the problem too. Is like they're hiking all this stuff up, and people don't think that it's going to cost more. Like the wages will not go down. They're not going to go down. They're going to stay up. Like, is everyone going to just fire all their employees because they refuse to come to work for minimum wage now? You go to McDonald's, you buy a breakfast sandwich and it's $8. It's like that used to be $3. We're $8 now, and that's because it costs $20 to pay the person to stand behind the thing, take your order, and it costs $20 to have the person put it together. And it's like this stuff's not going to go down. That's what drives me insane about this inflation. They're like, oh, we're going to get inflation under control. Or shit. You're not going to get inflation under control. No. It's going to stay the same as where it's at. The stuff's not going to go down. So what's going to be what's going to change that? What's going to make it better? And they have nothing.
And one of the things they tried to do years and years and years ago when they created the Fed was they said, this is to try to create some kind of monetary stability. And in reality, when the Fed was created in 1913, the monetary stability that we talk about is $1 in 1913 is worth a penny.
Yeah.
1 penny. So, I mean, there is no idea of stability. Now, the cool thing about it is if you're wealthy enough to borrow a shitload of money, you want to borrow a shitload of money during inflation.
Yep.
Because you are borrowing money today to pay it back in the future at cents on the dollar. Forgetting the interest rate, you're still paying the principal back.
Mm-hmm.
What? Right?
Yeah.
If I pay $100,000 back, if it's inflation's 3%, non-compounded, I pay $100,000 back in 10 years. It's 30% less.
Yeah.
The value of it. So I mean, it's
It's a game that I'm not able to play.
Right, but it's the cost of lives.
Yep, exactly.
Right? It's the same thing when people are, and that's what we're trying to do is you need object truth. And we lose that. And most people are willing to accept things for whatever they are. In other words, because for example, I don't watch media at all.
Yeah.
Zero. I get my headlines like dropped as headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I get them, I kind of look at them and go, and if I'm real serious, and I'm an academic.
Yeah.
My God. So I research everything. I mean,
you look for the real story.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost required to go, well, okay, now that's his opinion. What's the other opinion? Right.
Right. Also looking for reliable sources because I mean, it's one of those deals where you could just pull it up whatever you want and just decide like they're telling you need to wear a mask and then you take it a second step further and do the research on what the mask actually does and then realize that, oh, it doesn't do anything. So why in the hell are we doing this? Instead, you're like, oh, they told me it's safer. I mean, there's people, I can't believe the people that are still doing it. Like, it's like, this doesn't really do anything. Like if you're that sick, stay home. Don't walk out with a mask because you're still carrying that crap out to everyone.
Right. And I was COVID positive 3 times.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I got a cold sore on the first time. That was it.
Yeah. And what's funny about that is they're telling, like now all the truth is coming out. It's like, oh, well, yeah, you can just treat it like the flu. You can just treat it like that, Yeah, and Nikki says you can't trust any source. Well, I think that you really can't trust any source, but when there's people who've actually done research into it, I mean, I still feel like peer-reviewed articles are not always true, but they are the best thing where someone has actually done research and gone through it and combed through it with a fine-tooth comb. Doesn't mean that it's exact because you can have a peer-reviewed article that does like a correlation study and I don't know, like one of the ones that I remember in college was like, people who eat ice cream are violent. So they go out and they find 10 people and they do this correlation study and then they get it peer reviewed. Well, they use 10 people. That's a pretty small sample. You know, you need to have a bigger sample. Like it really just, it's more of, hey, it's peer reviewed, but then start looking at the sample size, start looking at the study, like how it was done and all that stuff. It's tough. You have to actually think with your own head instead of letting other people think for you.
Oh, and there's also one last little thing, and there's this great little thing where they had found these gold coins with an emperor's face on it, and that from the Roman times. And they honestly believed for the better part of 200 years that this emperor never existed, that he was a phantom. So they thought the coins were fake. Well, it just so happened that whatever the technology changed, and they were actually able to look at the striations in the metal and all this kind of stuff. And they also found some evidence that the emperor was real. So something that they believed was true for 200 years, which was the coins were fake, now have been accepted that the coins are actually real.
Yeah.
So some of it is, according to our best research, this is what we believe is true.
Yep.
At this point, right? But we know that if the research gets better or our perspective changes, so truth can be a little fleeting based upon what they think the earth was, everything revolved around the earth.
Yeah.
Until they realized, no. We had flat earth theory. We had, come on, man, really? But again, right. Based upon their truth at the time, that's what they had. So what is the cost of lies? You don't have any foundation to make a good decision.
Yep.
That's the cost of lies.
Yep, and it's a great topic, and I think that's the main point of the whole situation is that just, we need to be open. We need to have our eyes open. We can't believe everything we hear. We have to see and we have to research it out and find the correct answer, which isn't always the correct answer, but have a better understanding of it. Don't rely on other people to teach you or tell you about what's actually going on in your life and in everyone else's life.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, Robert. Awesome chapter. We'll get back to the next one next Wednesday. Monday, we're going to try something a little bit different. We're going to actually try to go live on TikTok together. We're going to see how we can make that happen. And we're going to go over a couple topics. So we're going to talk about how we feel about certain things and stuff like that. So Robert's going to be joining me from here on out, Mondays and Wednesdays. And we're going to keep this going and see where it takes us. So
sounds wonderful.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.